So I said some really cool stuff, except I forgot to turn on the microphone. So I'll have to say it again. Can you guys hear me now? All right, let's just give it a second. That's the beauty of live. I was just talking with somebody who she's trying to get some live garden mentoring stuff up, and she shot her whole Zoom thing that she was doing, forgot to hit record, and I was giving her a hard time, just joking around, and lo and behold, I forgot to put the sound on. So what I was saying was I'm really excited to do this membership. I appreciate you guys spending your money. So as we do the first couple, I really want to get feedback on how this could be most useful to you all for really developing a garden mentoring membership that helps you all have a better garden and just better quality of life in the garden. So all the feedback through the chats I'll be keeping. I'll be asking for feedback. You guys gave me a lot of ideas for the exclusive series, some things to do here. So I really appreciate it. There's also not many of us, so I don't think there's going to be hundreds of people on at once. And this will be kind of a real nice personal way to be able to help you all in the gardens, but also you guys can help each other. So before we kind of get rolling, can you all shout out where your gardens are? Because I think it's important that if you guys are within a couple hundred miles of each other or several kilometers, your gardens are going to be similar. So maybe you guys can lean on each other for support and information and stuff like that. So I am in Maryland. I'm in Zone 7, just outside of Baltimore. So if you guys just say where you're at, that'd be great. And I think this could be a pretty tight group. I really have no idea what to expect, but I plan to do this for, really 15 months, for the rest of this year and through 2023. And at the end of 2023, I'll reevaluate on kind of this value for the membership. All right, so being the first kind of live kind of mentoring, what I thought, here's my outline. So let me give you the outline. It'll take 2 seconds. So the first 15 to 30 minutes, I thought we would do kind of an immediate Q&A, because I suspect not everybody will be able to hang around for up to 2 hours. So maybe people would want to answer questions that are kind of pressing. Maybe they have somewhere to go. So that first 15 to 30 minutes would be for immediate questions and answers. And then the next 10 minutes, the second part, some quick garden tips and techniques, usually related to what's going on right now. I'm really going to be emphasizing watering, and I'll talk about that today, for example. And then we'll go back to another 15 minutes of questions and answers related to the tips and techniques. Third part. And then the fourth part, 15 minutes on what I'm planting now, planting tips, and kind of looking at what we're doing here in North America, but also respecting what's going on in the other half of the world with regards to planting. Like, what can you get in now? Best as seeds, best as transplants, all that kind of stuff. That will take maybe 30 to 60 minutes, depending on what's going on. But the last hour is just going to finish up with open topics from you all, whatever's on your mind, questions and answers. But I'm really going to focus on how this can best help you have better gardens. Does that make sense? Any questions at this point? And I'll be checking. You guys still with me? With only 15 of us or so, the chat doesn't move that quickly. And Keely, sorry, I was clicking. I just put you in timeout. That was an accident. You should be fine. I apologize. nobody is. Let's see if I can get her back here. I apologize. All right, so let's just start with questions then. This is a small group, so I have plenty of time to answer questions, and we'll just start with the top. So Rhett has a question. So I have a question. This is my first year growing cabbage and missed the cabbage loopers coming in. Is 7 Dust followed by neem spray a good remedy? So I don't mind using 7 Dust. It's a chemical. It's really effective. The way that 7 Dust works is that if you ever, for whatever reason, and it'd be really hard, if you got an overdose, the EpiPens, you could give yourself an injection, you would be okay. So it's a very different chemical compared to some other synthetic dust. So I don't mind using 7. It is a good combination. 7 Dust, if you get an infestation on your brassicas like your cabbage or something, that 7 Dust works really quickly. You could use Captain Jack's Dead Bug Dust Spray. That's organic. It's not as fast as 7, but it's effective, and I use that a lot. And you would basically dust your cabbage, your brassicas, cauliflower, kales, broccoli. In the evening is what I recommend so that the pollinators aren't really coming to it. The bonus of cabbage is there's no flowers, so there's not a lot of good pollinators going to it. So I don't mind using dusts there more often than not. So anyway, you dust the plant in the evening, wash it off in the day, maybe do it a second night. That will get rid of any infestation, helps control what is moving and crawling. And then I would go to the neem oil. The neem oil is wonderful if you are making sure you're buying cold pressed neem oil. And that's 100% neem oil. It means it has the azadirachtin in it, which is the component from the neem tree nut that kills off chewing insects. If you buy like neem oil, a lot of times at Home Depot or Lowe's, you look on the label, bottom left corner, usually it says hydrophobic extract of neem. And that is basically the good stuff pulled out of it. It's no more valuable than really using like vegetable oil or something like that. So first thing is you want 100% cold pressed neem oil, and then go ahead and spray it on your plants every 7 to 10 days and keep that routine going. Whatever you pick between dusts and sprays for your plants, it's more important to stick to that routine. When I got tired out from the heat, some of you may have heard me talking about that towards the end of July, I missed the watering routine. I missed some of the spraying routine. The diseases came in. My garden's back on track because I got back on track with those routines. Rebecca and Red, if you need more information, please ask a question again. Rebecca, question. My determinate plum tomatoes were a great harvest. The plants seem to have revived and have more blooms. Should I let them continue? So determinate variety tomato plants, generally we say they produce flowers over a period of weeks, produce fruit over a period of weeks, and then they're done. The truth is they don't really hibernate, but all that top growth sometimes dies off, but then new shoots start coming, new growth starts coming up from the ground or from some of the joints. So you can get a second round from your determinate tomatoes depending on the warmth and conditions of your gardening zone. So I would let them grow. There's nothing wrong with it. If you give them a nice drink of nitrogen, that will help the determinates that are coming back regrow. You're going to get a second harvest from them. And their lifestyle is just a little bit different than the indeterminate tomatoes, which, grow and grow and grow until disease or frost come. And they just keep producing flowers and fruit over a longer period of time versus the determinate tomatoes. So I would definitely keep them. A lot of people, like a tip for your determinate varieties, is whatever you're growing, sometimes, they will send out suckers. Like you'll have a leaf right here and a stem, and the growth that comes out of any joint in the tomato plant where the leaf and stem are, that is a sucker, and it's going to turn into a production stem. When it's about 2 or 3 inches, if you pluck it off, put it into water, it will root out. And then what people do is wait a couple of weeks, that cutting basically roots well, and then they plant that in for another clone of the determinate tomatoes. So you can keep them going throughout the season. The benefit really for determinate tomatoes is you might have a shorter season. They tend to develop tomatoes more quickly. They also tend to develop flower and fruit maybe before the diseases roll in. And people use them as a strategy to get tomatoes sooner, plant them before disease come, or plant them after diseases leave their area or pests leave their area. And again, if you have, if you need more on the question I'm answering, please elaborate. And Mark, Susan R. And I'm going to butcher your names. I apologize. Have you ever held over peppers or basil more than 1 year? So I'm in Maryland Zone 7. We get a freezing ground winter, which kills off anything that's kind of frost sensitive. So I have not been able to overwinter them outside. It's just not going to happen. I have brought pepper plants indoors. I've done that. It worked, but it really was a lot of work, because if you're bringing plants in from the outdoors and you're bringing in root balls that have soil in there, it's a good chance that all the insects and problems are going to hatch in there, and they're going to go throughout your house. So you have to really prep the roots and put sand on top of the container, like 1 inch of sand that seals in any hatching insects. It just really wasn't worth it for me. If I had a way to use a greenhouse or overwinter them in another way, I would. Basil, no, I just plant from seed. I put in my basil plants maybe 90 days ago or so. They're almost 3 feet tall or taller. They're doing really well. They get some shade. So one tip I have for basil is don't put it out where it's going to bake 24/7 in the sun. It really loves morning sun, then it likes some shade, and then it likes evening sun. So if you can put it in a place like that, your basil is going to go crazy over time, or over the summer. You can also take the kind of the new growth of the basil. That's what I'm trying to say. You can take the new growth of the basil, put that in water, and that's going to root out too. So you can multiply your basil plants just like that too. So you don't always have to be putting seeds down. In areas, going back to that question, where you don't get freezing winters, pepper plants will survive. They're basically a woody bush. So they're going to get really large. You do have to prune them back to kind of manage everything, but they're going to keep coming back. So a lot of people manage their pepper plants more like woody shrubs and stuff like that. Urban Chicken Mama. Everything I'm reading says not to put brassicas with tomatoes and corn and squashes. Is that true? That's the only space I have for my fall plants. So part of the mentoring is I want to give you my perspective on how I approach the garden, how I approach nature. So first thing is, everything you hear from me, from the internet, always ask why. So Urban Chicken Mama, I would ask you, if it's not a lot of typing, the beauty is I get to talk, which makes it so much easier, is why are they saying that? Like, if they're saying that for a reason, what's the reason? Maybe that reason makes sense. And the reason I say that is sometimes when you go online, these kind of web robots are just taking bits of information from everywhere. And if you read a lot, you see the same exact statement over and over and over again. So a lot of garden myths get perpetuated over volumes of material that aren't really written by people like you and I. They're not really written with much care. They're just thrown together, put somewhere, and people hope to make dollars off of the advertising and stuff like that. So that being said, I have never found a reason not to grow any plant together, period. Gardens are small. You know, it could be that, say, a heavy feeder like a squash plant might take out the nutrients, and then you put in your fall crops and they don't do well. Well, that's going to be true for most of your plants. Like, if you're just planting heavily in your garden beds and you're replacing and putting in new plants, you also have to be putting in compost. You also have to be putting in organic granular if you don't have enough compost, leaf mold. You have to be re-prepping that soil so that the new plants have the nutrition that they need to really do well. And I feel like that question, UCM, is really based about the nutrient take up of the different plants. I would also corn is a long feeder, so it takes a lot out of the soil, so you really have to replace it. I don't think there's enough truth to that without maybe more details. Harvest asks, question. I need to put on my glasses. Did I bring them? All right. Question, can I do a fall planting of cabbage here in Maryland? Yeah, you have plenty of time. There's several kinds of cabbage. So you can get more, of course, I forget the name, but you can get cabbage that grows more like this. It's more oval shaped. And just check the dates. That tends to mature more quickly than the round cabbage. So you have Copenhagen early cabbage. You have, 8-pound to 10-pound cabbages. You can also get the massive 30-pound cabbages. So you want to go with something now here in Maryland that might be a little bit smaller, but cabbage can take a frost and a freeze. And the cool thing about the cool weather crops is their leaf structure doesn't get disrupted when they frost or freeze. So you have plenty of time for cabbage. Actually, I think right now, if you put seeds in, they're going to germinate so quickly because the soil is warm. I don't think you're going to lose much time. If you were trying to put cabbage seeds in towards the end of September, things might slow down a little bit. So for my cool crops, I do a combination of both. I start seeding, and I seeded way too early this year because the heat just stuck around. But I seeded some of my cool crops earlier in August, which worked a couple years ago. This year, they got beat up because that heat just kept pounding. Anyway, seeds going in now, you got time for that. If you don't have room in your garden right now for direct seeding, start them in some flats and kind of get them growing. This way, you get 2 weeks, 3 weeks worth of growth in the flats. And then when you have space in your garden, you can put them out there. Summer to fall gardening, I really like because everything germinates so quickly. They get growing, the cool weather comes, and then everything slows down. And I think you get tastier leaves of kale and cabbage. I think you get nicer heads of broccoli and cauliflower. And I really like fall gardening. That's why I've been encouraging so many people, even if you're burned out from the heat. And I know we got crazy heat dome going on in really Western US and almost half of it. Flooding is everywhere. If you may not, I don't want this to go off rail. You may not believe in global warming. Let's table that. However, weather patterns really seem to be changing for whatever reason. And I'm finding in Maryland, I'm getting a longer season, more heat, and things are just adjusting. So take notes, because I think for whatever reason, the next 10 years or so is going to be a big adjustment on the temperatures that we're all growing in. I'm glad you're out of timeout. I apologize for that. All right, let's see. We got more questions. Let me go back up. Have you heard peppers? Just need to catch up to where I am. Yes. All right. Red has another question. I panicked, ordered Captain Jack's Neem Max this morning to get it tonight. It's on some cold press. Just read it to myself. So I don't know what Captain Jack's Neem Max is this morning that you ordered. 70% cold press neem. The other 30% could be emulsifiers. You just want to kind of read it. If it's 70% cold press neem, as long as it has the azadirachtin in it, AZADDAR, I can't spell it, azadirachtin in it. If I wrote it down, I could. You're good to go. If it says a hydrophobic extract of neem, they've pulled out the good stuff. What happens is, just for your information, is any oil can be called a miticide, can be called an insecticide, because any oil covers the tiny mites, suffocates them. Any oil covers soft body insects, suffocates them. The neem oil, if you pull out all the good stuff, is still an oil, so they can say it kills mites, manages fungus, etc. Oil manages fungus by coating the spores of the fungi and keeps them from spreading. But azadirachtin is the key component that you want present if you're spending the money on neem oil. All right. And Mark says, I'm in Phoenix area. My pepper and basil are on the second year. Basil is highly productive, but I noticed the peppers are smaller this year. So I don't know enough to help you with that. One, well, I don't know enough to say this is the reason. But one, peppers can be heavy feeders, so you want to make sure you're providing potassium and phosphorus in that space too, not just nitrogen. You can get more leaf growth sometimes, and the peppers and flowers don't come as you wish. But you also have to keep them fed, because in the second year, they're pulling a lot out of there. There's also a pruning component to it, which I don't know enough about, but I've seen, large second year peppers really cut back so that new growth comes, and they tend to produce okay. So you'll have to kind of check into that. All right, Susan. All right, you're the second part of the name height. Sorry about that. And that's great too. If your name is, if you actually want to go by your first name, put your first name in the question. That's better. Peppermint oil. I sprayed it on points where I prune so as not to attract bad bugs. Is it a good way to use it? It seemed to work. Yes. So peppermint oil. So when you cut a plant, like if you ever pick squash, which hopefully you are, cucumbers, you can smell the cucumber. You can smell the squash. If you prune leaves, you can smell the plants. If you prune tomatoes, you can smell the plants. Insects find their way to plants by smell. They can find them visually through different flower color. There's probably a third way that I'm not aware of, but those are the ones that I worry about the most. So peppermint oil is wonderful to mask the scent of your plants. However, our insects have been trying to find food for millions of years. So they're really good at figuring out where the plants are. So yes, it helps, especially when you cut it. So when you cut a plant, there's concern that insects can get into those wounds. So using that peppermint oil at cutting is great, because it's going to work for several days. The wound's going to dry over. It's going to be harder for problems to get in there. Peppermint oil also can act as a fungicide, and spraying the wound of the plant can help kind of, prevent disease from coming in. It's not mandatory. I mean, I've cut my plants many times, don't spray anything, and they do okay. Again, it goes back to, I know what pests come in. I know what diseases come in. So I am really trying to stick to a routine of sprays and management that keeps those pests and disease under control. I would love to say we can 100% eliminate problems, but the whole key is to manage them down. And that is kind of another, I don't know, I guess perspective with how I garden is I'm not trying to be 100% anything. I'm just trying to grow food, grow it in a way that's healthy, not get overly stressed, enjoy myself, and really manage down problems to something that's functional. And peppermint oil is a great way to do that. All right, so how much time was that? That was 25 minutes. All right, I'll answer one more question. So we'll go with the 30 minutes for the immediate question and answer, and then we'll go to the second part here. Rebecca, I planted a small African blue basil last year. Took cuttings in midsummer, rooted them, cut more from those. Then my brother-in-law kept one indoors, cloned it, and now, yeah, that's cool. That's not a question, but that's awesome. So basil and a lot of your plants really work that way. Some people, find that they have a tomato plant that grows really well, or a variety of basil that grows really well. Cuttings are much more, is the fastest way to grow new plants and get plants growing in your garden versus seeding. But it's also a great way to keep plants that seem to be doing well in your area alive. Why do I say that? Well, keep them alive and then keep them 100% true to form, so that you're replanting the same exact plant from cuttings over and over again. If for a reason you buy a hybrid tomato plant, which is safe, it has nothing to do with GMO, it's just cross-pollination done by people that are very passionate and breed tomato plants. If you have like a determinate variety plant that's doing well, but it's a hybrid, if you collect those seeds, save them, and plant them next year, they may not be true to form because they have the crosses of the parent plants in there. And, at some point, maybe I'll talk about that in another video. but you don't always get a true to form plant. You have to go generations of planting and planting before the seeds are stable and you get a stable cultivar. Anyway, if you do clones and you can keep them going, you will always have the same exact plant. So maybe you have this hybrid tomato that did really well. You take clones, you keep them in your house, you overwinter them, you just keep them going. You get the same exact plant. Same thing with the basil. Yeah, and Urban Chicken Mama, I have the other thing I would say is test out what you read. I mean, you'll know that if you tend to plant how they're saying maybe not to plant. I'm also not sure exactly. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily put corn and squash and tomatoes all together, so you'll be rotating them. But if you do something with them and they don't grow well, take notes and maybe see what happens. But I think you're perfectly fine, especially if you're putting in compost and new nutrients. All right. So the first part is generally going to be what we just did. It will be questions and answers for those that may have to kind of come and go. And I want to be able to get through most of them. Now, the second part, maybe 10 minutes on this. So gardening tips. So what I've been stressing is we do not water our plants enough. And I understand totally that there's shortages of water throughout the US and different places. And we can't always water how we wish. But if you're able to, if you're able to store water from rain or you're able to get water, I have water in the well, so I get plenty of water. You just want to keep a routine of more water than maybe you think. And the best way to explain it is we got probably 3 inches of rain yesterday, and I just went to a bed. It's an raised bed. It's about this wide, almost 2.5 feet wide, maybe 3 feet, 6 feet long. Rained, wheelbarrow has 2-3 inches of water in it. As I moved that soil, because I was mixing in more soil to plant my cool weather crops, as soon as I got down about 1 inch, it was completely dry. So water will make your garden thrive versus just survive. If you have questions about watering, let me know. I can't tell you exactly how often to water, but we can kind of go with the fall gardening. So now, since we're putting in, say, seeds, I just put in radish seeds, bok choy, kohlrabi, lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, purple top turnips. Put in the seeds over the last 6 or 7 days. They've all sprouted, by the way. Got that rain yesterday. That was great. But every day, maybe even twice a day, because that sun comes out when it's 88, 90 degrees here and beats down on that top 2 inches, you really want to keep your seedlings well watered for the first week until they've germinated, they've been growing a couple of days, and that root has gone deeper into the soil. So with respect to watering for your fall crops, going from summer heat into the fall, you probably want to water every day. If you're getting some rain, that top inch is going to be watered, you're good to go. But if you have bigger plants like tomato plants, and mine are all coming back now with a vengeance because they're getting watered, you want to give them a good deep soaking at least twice a month, twice a week, not month, twice a week. In my opinion, that's where the water is going to go down several feet and really soak down. And then with that, you want to make sure you're watering a couple times a week, the top 4 to 6 inches. There's lots of surface roots with squash, tomato, peppers, and other plants like that. So you're really watering the top 4 inches, 6 inches, and you're also watering deep down. Rarely do we get enough rain every week to do all that. You can, and you might be in a zone where rain is perfectly fine. We get a ton of rain here. April, May, beginning of June, I don't have to do a lot of watering. June 15th forward, I have to water, every other day. So you have to know your garden a little bit. Watering is really important. If you had a garden this year that did okay, think about, again, like I was saying earlier, challenge what I just said. Maybe he's crazy and they don't need that much water. Water a couple tomato plants more often than you think. Water a couple pepper plants more often than you think. Or take care of a bed with a little bit more watering and see how they do compared to the rest of your garden. That's the best way to learn. It's like take information you hear from me, from your fellow gardeners, and then go ahead and and kind of challenge the idea, implement things, take notes, and see how it goes. I would also recommend, kind of for the tip part too, is that if you're going to start your cool weather crops, all of them, leafy greens, spinach, Swiss chard, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kales, collards, etc., you don't need to start them indoors under grow lights. You can use the light outside, but try and put them, I wanted to pull it out here, a couple of the containers, but I don't have them. You want to start them in larger containers. Instead of the small, tiny 6-pack cells, you want larger containers. I do sell those at my seed shop, or yogurt cups, or take some water bottles, cut them in half, start them in there. Just make sure there's holes for drainage. Anyway, you want a bigger starting base for your seeds that you're starting in flats, because you can put them outside. They're going to heat up. So you want to keep them out of the southern western sun. You don't want that flat baking in the sun. That heat is going to dry them out. They're really going to accelerate growth. They're going to become leggy, not because they don't have enough light, but because they're so warm. So I like keeping them sort of on the northeast side of my house. Once they germinate in the evening, I may move them to the front so they get more sun, but you can move them back and forth and germinate them outside. You don't need anything elaborate indoors. And that's going to give you backup plants. So I've direct seeded. I have backup plants. And I'm also waiting for my summer crops to finish up and open up more space. So that's a couple of ways that you can really start your fall garden. All right, let's go back to the questions. And if you have questions about what I said, just throw them out there too. Yeah, so just going back to Urban Chicken Mama, they are supposedly not compatible to grow next to each other. And I'm kind of curious now. I can tell you that I've grown squash next to tomatoes with no worries. I'll look into it more, bring that question up again and try and find out why. But I usually like to find like university papers and stuff on it to really understand it, but it could be possible. But it's not like, you have the black walnut tree that its roots go out and it secretes something that kills off other trees around there. I mean, I'm not really, the tomatoes, squash, and cucumbers, or tomatoes, squash, and corn don't do that, but I'll look into it. Rebecca, I planted this, we did that one. All right, let's go down. Red cabbage, red acre cabbage is my favorite harvest. Just threw that out there. So like you may be in a place where you might not get a full head of cabbage if you plant it now, but the leaves are absolutely delicious. I love the leaves of red acre cabbage. Sometimes I just grow it for that, especially in my spring to summer. I don't get the best forming heads of cauliflower, broccoli, and even cabbage sometimes. But I just pick the leaves. I slice them into thin slices. I put them right into my salads and stuff like that. So you don't always have to grow everything to perfect maturity. You can grow a lot of these plants in the fall till the heavy freeze comes, knocks them out. But you can use the leaves of the plant if you want to. Red acre cabbage is wonderful. And it's fast. Yep, 65 days. Angela, I think that it's too late to plant broccoli seeds in Maryland. That being said, I would give it a try, but I would look for a variety that's a little bit quicker. So it's just tough because broccoli leaves can take the frost and the freeze. The flower buds, what we eat, can take a little bit of a frost and freeze. But if something heavy comes with broccoli and cauliflower, sometimes it damages that flower head that we harvest. So you definitely, if you plant it now, you will get leaves, you will get buds that form. It may not get to the size you want, but you're really on the bubble. Like end of September, I would say no. Right now, you're kind of on the bubble. I would, give it a try. And it's hard to find transplants right now. They're also kind of expensive when you find them. I always recommend don't go to the big box stores. I don't want to get on the company that sells a lot of those plants and that grows the plants and the company that sells the plants, but they're charging way too much money. That's my only worry. You can buy whatever you want, but when you go to the big box stores, just realize you're kind of paying a lot for it. So you make sure your plant's really healthy and you get something out of it. So that wasn't the best answer, Angela, but you're right on the bubble. Broccoli Rob and broccolini are related, and they have smaller buds, like, maybe the pieces of broccoli that you would pick out of the bigger head. I am growing broccolini and broccoli Rob. It's broccoli and Rob, R-A-A-B, and then broccolini, just like it sounds. They are good leafy green that you can pick, and they produce nice little broccolets. I don't know what they would be called, but little buds of broccoli that are wonderful. Rebecca, harlequin beetles have devastated the collards or the kale that she was growing, I guess, spring into the summer and throughout the summer. So I just had the harlequin beetle roll into my horseradish plant. I put on that, that was actually Seven Dust. It wasn't Captain Jack's. Seven Dust is chemical. Use it if you wish. If not, use Captain Jack's. So the horseradish are just big leaves that don't flower, that don't attract insects that I'm worried about possibly killing off. Anyway, Seven Dust wiped out the harlequin beetles overnight. So that's how well it works. Captain Jack's works really well too. But keep an eye out. So like if those harlequin beetles are rolling in to damage your kale, they're going to show up again next year. What we kind of do from growing spring to summer with cool crops and then summer to fall with cool crops is sometimes we get through that period where the insects are hatching and multiplying. So the fall weather crops really do much better. The insects don't like the cold, the diseases don't like the cold or the frost, and these crops do really well. All right. Calabrese is a good sprouting broccoli. It's excellent. Just buzzing through the questions real quick. All right, so it does contain azadirachtin. So what's so weird? This is kind of like my soapbox. You'll go into a store and you're going to see triple neem this, neem that, whatever. And the company's pulled all the azadirachtin out. And then next to it, you're going to find azadirachtin being used in a name somehow. So they're like, one company pulls out the azadirachtin, then they give it to another company that packages it under a different name that usually has a form of azadirachtin in it. And I'm like, as consumers, as gardeners, why do we have to work so hard to truly understand what's in the packaging and stuff like that? It drives me crazy. When you see the word organic, it doesn't necessarily mean it's organic. When you see the word natural, it doesn't necessarily mean it's natural like we think. It's not unnatural, but it could be. When you see forestry product, you think, oh, forest, it comes out of a forest. That could be great. Well, wood pallets can be shredded and put into a bag of cheap topsoil, and it can be called forestry product. So you really have to learn labels and contents of the stuff that we're buying so that you understand. Like at my seed shop, we sell rosemary oil, peppermint oil, 100% essential oil. You make your own sprays and mixes. It's cheaper that way. We sell 100% cold pressed neem oil because you get what you need. You can make, like just say one bottle. Instead of buying a spray bottle or something in a store that costs $9-10, you buy the bottle of oils and you make whatever, 5-10 gallons. There's a lot that we can do on our own, understanding what the products are, buying them in your raw form, and then making the sprays ourselves. A good example of that is, for instance, fertilizers. So I will always be compost first with respecting we can't all grow. We all, well, I guess we do grow, but we all can't make enough compost for various reasons. But if you can be 100% compost, just compost your yard forever. Your plants are going to be amazing. If you can't make enough compost, we go to the organic granular fertilizers. And that's where the marketing comes in again with all this fancy packaging. And it says, true biotics and different microbes and all that kind of stuff. Your soil has plenty of microbes in it. You don't need to buy additional microbes through fertilizers to take care of your earth beds. Maybe you would want to use that maybe in like containers or something where the microbes just maybe aren't there because you're using a soilless mix or you're mixing it in. But you can go out to your garden, take a handful of earth, maybe some worms in it, throw it into that soil, into that container. The microbes will multiply. Maybe you got some worm eggs in there. You're going to have worms in there now. You can kind of do that on your own. And it's fine. If you like the mycorrhizae and you like all that stuff, I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm saying don't overspend to buy it. Figure out, what you feel is a fair price. So anyway, when you buy organic fertilizers, the granular type, they're usually blood meal, bone meal, feather meal. Meal is just a word saying pulverized bone, blood that's freeze dried, feathers that are ground up, and chicken parts that are ground up. Anytime you see the word meal, it's ground up something. And then chicken manure, dried and stuff like that. If you were to buy, and years ago, you could buy like a 50-pound bag of blood meal, 50-pound bag of bone meal. You could buy bags of chicken manure, and it was really inexpensive, like ridiculously cheap. And that's 50, 50, and 50, or 40, 40, and 40, 40 pounds. You could have 120 pounds worth of fertilizer if you mix it together. And it was really cheap, maybe like, I don't want to over exaggerate, but let's just say if you made it yourself, it was like 50 cents a pound. Now, when you're buying it in a bag, you can buy it from some places, some companies that have all this fancy stuff on there, and you could be paying $4, $5, $6, $7 a pound for the same ingredients you could just buy in bulk at some farm feed store. So that's what I want people to understand. If you're buying the organic granular fertilizer, I just say buy what's on sale, something that's close to being balanced, which means it might be like a 5 nitrogen, 5 phosphorus, 5 potassium, up or down a couple of numbers, doesn't matter, and just buy what fits your budget. All right, so one thing, so if I'm kind of going down here and I miss your question, and you'll know because I've kind of moved on, please just copy it and paste it and throw it back into the thread. All right, checking questions. All right, that was my ramble on, I guess we started with that Rhett found that that his spray did have the azadirachtin, so that's great. Rebecca, advice for knowing when to pick watermelon. So I don't really know. I mean, if people are picking it, please help her out. What I usually wait for is a hollow sound and also the size. So, I'm looking for the size. Sometimes like the Moon and Stars or the, what is that really popular? Sugar Baby, watermelon. Sometimes they can be this small and they're still ripe. So you're kind of looking for how long it's been maturing on there. But I look for the size. I give it a wrap. You're going to hear a little bit of a hollow sound. But the stem from the melon to the vine, that will begin to brown and dry out. And that's usually a good sign that it's ready to pick. But I don't have 100% way to know for sure. All right. I'm going to have to go back too and write down some of the varieties you guys are talking about. I've not heard of some of them. All right, so I'm just making sure I didn't lose my place here. Let me just see. I was wondering, like, if I click on it, if I could keep my place. All right, just rambling. Question: It kills me every time you let your It kills me every time you let your artichokes go to flower when my artichoke plants are stunted and suffering every year. What is the secret? So if you haven't seen, I grow globe artichokes. Here in Maryland Zone 7, it's like 50-50. if the roots are going to survive our winter. We get maybe 1 inch to 2 inches of freezing soil surface. So it can damage the artichoke. So what I'm doing now is I'll be mulching, on top of my soil, maybe by 6 inches. Hopefully the artichokes come back. The trick for artichokes is if you're growing them by seed, start them in January. I'll be doing that. That will be something I'll be talking on these memberships too, is more in depth about what I'm starting and what I'm doing, more so than I do in my videos. And you'll hear more about just how I'm growing. That's going to be in the Grow as I Grow series, but it'll also flow into these live mentorings in case you're not paying for the tier. Everything's not going to be like separated. It'll kind of blend through tier 1, tier 2, and it'll also be in the public videos too. So you want to start your globe artichokes early, like in January, February, in larger containers, indoors, get them growing. They need a period of cold outdoors before they go into the ground and produce. So what that means is you start them in January, February, you get them growing where it's warm, and then you put them outside. I can't remember if it's like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but you let them finish up as their transplants outside where the roots are getting cold. Bring them in if the temperatures are getting, to freezing and stuff like that. But they need that chill period. And then when you put them into the warm ground, they believe they've overwintered. They're ready to go and take off. That's one trick to the globe artichokes. The other trick is to just prep the bed well. I mean, if you have lots of compost, of course, use that. I throw in a handful of any organic granular fertilizer around the planting area. Second one around the planting area, maybe in a space like this big, work it into the top a couple of inches. And then when I dig the hole, another handful, mix it through. I'll throw compost in there too. You just want to make sure the nutrients are there, N, P, and K, the major ones. And it should do okay. If it looks like it's struggling, after being in the ground for a couple of weeks and the warmth is coming, hit it with fish emulsion, any water soluble organic fertilizer. I also use AgroThrive now, and just kind of give it what it needs to get that leaf growth. You've already put in enough stuff for, it to grow flowers and produce and stuff like that. I actually don't eat my artichokes. I think I've talked about that. I just love the flower. It looks like this purple sea anemone that should be on a coral reef or something like that. Going back to the questions. Give me a second. I know there has to be a way I can freeze this chat when I'm talking. All right, so next question. Let's see where we are on time. Holy cow, it's 5:20. I could probably do this for 3 hours. So let me just talk about real quick what I'm planting now, then I'll go back to the questions. So I've already mentioned it, just to kind of stick with what I'm doing, or how I want to kind of run the outline for these membership lives, mentoring lives, is I'm seed starting directly right now. My first wave of radishes, my first wave of pak choi. Pak choi, bok choy, I find does not transplant well. It's really sensitive to the warmth, so it really flowers quickly. So always, in my opinion, start it from seed. I'm starting some now. It may be too warm and it's just going to flower and it won't be great. But I'll be seeding that again in 2 weeks. So you want to do intermittent. That's not the right way to say it. I'm not going to try and say it again because now it's stuck in my brain. But you want to do succession planting every 2 weeks with radishes, because you just don't want 1,000 of them coming at a certain time. And you want to do planting of the bok choy every 2 weeks, so you get that right temperature combo, and you'll get beautiful Chinese cabbage if it works out. And again, going from summer to fall is awesome for bok choy. Kohlrabi, I have planted. It's one of my favorite cool weather crops. You pick it, it's a round root ball that grows right above the ground. You pick it, you peel it. I use my pocket knife sometimes, and I eat it right out in the garden, just like an apple. It's delicious. You can also eat the leaves if you want to. But I've been struggling with it from spring to summer, so I'm really going all in summer to fall, and that's what I do recommend. Like if you are struggling with a plant, don't give up on it. If it's something you really enjoy, try planting it at different times, and maybe you find that right time. So like kohlrabi's going in as seeds. It's already germinated, so it's in one bed. So I also put it into my containers as transplants, and I'm growing white early Vienna, and I'm growing a purple kohlrabi, and I'm going to figure this out. It took me years to be able to grow radishes, to be honest with you, and I finally figured it out. Less nutrients, put them in there into a nice loose area, space them the right way. I'm getting beautiful radishes now. I think I was over fertilizing them. So radishes, pak choi, kohlrabi. I put in my lettuce, my spinach, my chard, purple top turnips I recommend, all from seed. I put in my peas. I put in transplants of Brussels, cauliflower, broccoli, kale that I grew over at Freetown Farm. So I really have everything going. And what I recommend most is, if you're not sure, plant it. Take notes. That's the best way to learn, because all of our gardening zones are going to be different. And then planting tips is vary. Sometimes it may be a variation in what you do. Like with the kohlrabi, may do better for me as a direct seed planted versus a transplant, or vice versa. But you're not going to really know until you try it out. Checking to see what we got in here for questions. So Red asks, now, do you find that overwatering affects tomato flavor? This year I went gangbusters on watering, and most of my tomatoes seem to be lacking in flavor. Could it just be in my mind? It could be, but I think there is truth to that, and it's more truth on the plant taking in a lot of water quickly. And part of the watering is getting consistent. So it's consistent water, keeping that moisture, should I say it, consistent, so that the plant is just pulling in enough water to manage. Sometimes if they get a little bit dry, then you give them a lot of water, they pull in water really fast. That's why you see like cherry tomatoes split and stuff like that. Sometimes the plants can't help but just pull into water. So if you're watering within a day or two before and it's a lot of water, they could be pulling in a lot of water, and it does affect the flavor. However, it doesn't wash away the sweetness. So there would still be the sweetness there. It doesn't dissolve the sugars in there and stuff like that. So it's probably a combination of both. I would again encourage you, it might be interesting to put grow all your tomatoes the way you want to, but take one variety that's supposed to be sweet, or two varieties, put them in another place and kind of let them grow and see if the flavor changes. And Kaylee basically said in a nice short way of what I said, pick them before watering, because a day or two before they may fill up with water. And let me ask, so is it Kaylee or Keeley? If you can just spell it phonetically, because I always have a question. I want to say it the right way. Just checking. Yeah, Rebecca, I mean, if it rains and it pours and it's hot, then storms come in. A lot of them split. And all you can really do is, and the reason they split is they just pull into water too quickly. You can buy thicker skinned cherry tomatoes, but then you have a thicker skin to chew through. It really depends what you want to grow. Rebecca, always here to grow marigolds to deter pests. Well, every one of those plants, yeah. So marigolds. So here's the thing with marigolds. Let's see where we are on time. Okay, we have time. Marigolds, there is truth. And again, this goes back to the garden myths. There is truth that marigolds repel insects. Deer will still eat them if they're hungry. Other animals will eat them. The old French original marigolds from the 1700s, give or take, whatever, smelled really strong. They had that real strong, powerful marigold smell, similar to what we were talking about with the peppermint oil. That would confuse insects. They couldn't find stuff. They could even repel insects. Maybe some of them didn't like that. Over time, hybridizers have bred out some of that odor for bigger, better, and more beautiful flowers. So when you're growing marigolds to deter, you want to get the old heirloom variety French marigolds that have the smell. You're not really looking for the flowers. And it does help some. But again, if any of these things were 100% true, or it's like mosquito bites. We all get mosquito bites. I'm lucky enough that for whatever reason, I don't get many. Like I might go out into the garden and I'll get one over 30 minutes. My wife will get like 25. So I'm lucky. But if there was a spray or a cure or a home remedy that kept mosquitoes off of us, we would have figured it out. Everybody would be doing that. Same thing with, garden tips and tricks is if marigolds were 100% effective, we'd be growing that variety all over the garden. We'd have no pests or problems. I would add them in there because in the way that you're managing down problems in your garden, you want to have a strategy of companion planting that may keep some away. Let's just say for like July 1st to July 10th. And then for whatever reason, the scents change, but you come in with your peppermint spray, you hit your garden with peppermint spray. That helps confuse the insects for another 10 days. And by doing different things to manage the pests, the problems, the diseases, you manage them down and you get a bigger and stronger harvest. I hope that made sense. All right. So Rebecca also has like 3 feet tall marigolds that are sprawling. They will grow crazy. Like I want something that's not just, 6 or 8 inches, but I've grew those 3-4 foot ones too. And they're growing everywhere. I just cut them back. If the stem or the vine of the marigold, they're almost like vines, falls over and touches the ground, it's going to root out. I just cut them back and I move them where I need to move them. I'm just using them in my garden inside the fence for the reason that we just talked about. Susan says, is there a specific fertilizer solution that could benefit jalapenos and bell peppers? I don't use anything specific, or I should say, I don't use a regimented scheduling of feeding different variations of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, water soluble, for my pepper plants. I pretty much compost, handful of organic granular, mix it in well, planting whole, nothing fancy. Fish emulsion or AgroThrive, depends on what I want to use. I cut back on the nitrogen when the plants are maybe 2 feet tall or whatever, or begin to produce. But if they look like they're struggling, I hit them again with nitrogen. And the fish emulsion I use is Alaska brand. 5 nitrogen, 1 phosphorus, 1 potassium. I'm not affiliated with them. I just like that mix. I use that for the high nitrogen. My plants do okay. There's also, I think it's More Bloom. It's a 0, 10, 10. That's by Alaska brand too. Again, I don't work with them. That's 10%, 0 nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, 10% potassium. Sometimes people say that helps with more blooms and more fruit development. I never really paid much attention to that because compost itself is well below a 111 NP and K. And if you put tons of that down, your plants are growing in, and it doesn't matter. They just have a nice, continuous, slow supply of everything they need. So they're always just slowly pulling it in. And that's what it's really about. It's about providing, what's needed in a form that the plant can just kind of take it over the whole growing season. For sure, like if I'm growing potatoes, I throw in more bone meal or I increase the phosphorus and potassium. That can make a difference for sure. But focusing on peppers, I don't find that I have to do much more with the potassium and phosphorus. But to answer your question, More Bloom, Alaska brand, is a 0, 10, 10, and you can try that. Kathy, I sprayed my carrots and beet seedlings with peppermint oil after a heavy rain. It looked like they had been chewed off completely. Should I wait and see if they grow back or replant them? So they are going to grow back as long as the roots are fine. I would say there was a chance that you had something like snails and slugs come in, which ate them down. And that's one of the benefits, too, of starting your cool weather crops in seed flats so that they're bigger. You put them into the ground, they're stronger. When you have germinating seedlings, they're kind of small, of course. A tiny snail can come in, chew it down. And I would guess that's what you probably have. I would say, I don't know if it's going to be hooked to this video or not. I can't remember, but I have an Amazon shop. Anyway, you want to find slug bait that either has iron phosphate or sulfur in it. These are baited slug baits. You know, if you have pets, you don't want to throw it around, don't throw it around. But my garden is fenced in. You know, I don't let my dog walk through there. There's concern that it could harm pets. I've never seen any definite proof. But of course, if a dog eats a pound of iron phosphate, it could be problematic. Side note. The iron phosphate, the sulfur baits are wonderful. You just scatter them around. I usually put them out actually in March before I have a lot of my garden planted. The snails and slugs become activated when it warms up. They eat that. They stop feeding. They die off. I would scatter some of those baits around your garden because I would guess that's what you have coming in eating the tops down of your plants. If you do have space, I would plant a couple more, but I think you're going to be okay. Just reading again the questions. Urban Chicken Mama, my wife is camera shy. So when I do videos with other females, a lot of people say, hey, your wife seems really nice. It's not my wife. she doesn't want to be in the videos. Maybe one day she will, or she'll be a cameo in the distance like that. I am planning on doing a video series in some capacity with a friend. She is a chef and a master gardener. I want to do more cooking videos. They're just so time consuming. Like I love to be able to do this where I can just talk, go into the garden with the camera, take pictures, but cooking videos can be like a 2 or 3 hour event and they're time consuming. All right. All right, so we're out an hour and a half. This kind of mentoring membership lives, they will go up to 2 hours. Any last questions before we finish up? Kohlrabi, I eat raw. I mean, I will actually peel the skin off. If you get it when it's tender, you can actually eat the skin, but I peel it off. If you get it right, it's super tender. If you let it grow too long, it will become woody. So I either eat it just like an apple or I cut it into thin slices and I just put a little bit of coarse salt on there and it's really wonderful. You can, julienne, is that like julienne when you cut it into little like fry slices? That's wonderful in salads. I don't really saute it down. You could do that. I just like eating it raw. Yeah, the dog-friendly brand, it's the iron phosphate slug baits that are more concerned for pets versus the sulfur baits. So you can go with the sulfur baits. They're just as effective. I've used both. I don't notice much of a difference. Harvest asks, what are your thoughts on mulching with cardboard shredded in a heavy-duty paper shredder? So I usually use cardboard when I build beds. I put it flat on the ground. I put earth on top of it. It breaks down. It's a wonderful weed barrier. Plant roots grow right through it. As a mulch, I never really thought of it. I don't have an answer for that. What I think you're saying is you shred it up. It's in shreds, and you would put it down around your garden and use it as your mulch. I can't think of anything negative. I mean, as long as you're, of course, taking off the plastic. There are glues used in there. The glues are usually sugar-based, so they're not toxic or problematic or anything like that. I would have to say I don't know. I've never really thought about that. I would give it a try. I would probably like to use that cardboard more as you would shred it. 50% of that, 50% of cut grass with no chemicals on it. Mix it together, let it compost and break down. It's going to be a great compost. I use cardboard that way, but I don't know as a mulch. Stacy, I'll try and remember that. I am terrible with names. Like, I remember stories, I remember pictures and details. All right, let's see. Yeah, so if you have curious golden retrievers, go with the sulfur baits. Yeah, I mean, if you use the mulch, the cardboard mulch, let us know. I just feel like it might get really soggy and break down real quickly. Probably will grow some sort of mold on it more so than shredded hardwood, but molds aren't really bad, so I'm not too worried about that. Using hay as mulch, Kathy, that's fine. There's always concern. Like, you're always going to hear, people. There are people that say, hey, be concerned. There might be some herbicides on your hay. And that's a nice way to say it. There's some people that say, you're going to kill your garden, run for the hills. If you're going to use hay, I'm trying to get it right. Hay can have more weed seeds in it. Straw seems to have less weed seeds in it. Maybe I have it backwards. But either way, you want to know your source, and you want to just know what they're spraying in your garden. But it works really well as a mulch, in my opinion. And it breaks down nicely. It feeds the soil life. It's a good way to add organic matter. Have you ever grown wine cap mushrooms? Yes, I've been growing them for 2 years. They're amazing. I'll talk about that. We still have time. So wine caps will grow more in the sun. I have wood chips all over my garden. I just buy wine cap, W-I-N-E, wine cap mushroom spawn. It's usually the mycelium in sawdust. Sprinkle it through my wooden, my mulched area that's wood. Let it do its thing. I also have a shadier area where I've done layers and I put in the wine caps. But I get wine caps in the beginning of the spring, and I will get them now as the weather's beginning to cool. They're a really good way to grow mushrooms. Oh, I remember harvest in the Bernese Mountain Dogs. For people that don't know, I have a Bernese Mountain Dog and a Poodle mix, and I've just actually trained her to walk the whole 2 acres with me, which is really cool. She loves going out. She'll walk the garden now without going into the beds most of the time. She listens, so I'm really excited. You're going to be seeing Willow more often. And then this year, Kim from Cali Kim, Jerry and Kim, we did a sort of a meet and chat, I guess, at Freetown Farm, and we hope to do that again next year. All right, so I think we could wrap up here. There are 16 of us. It looks like, a handful hung around, and that's kind of my hope, that I'll be doing the live mentorings 3 times a month, up to 2 hours. different days. I mean, each month I'll put them out. It's really going to fit into my schedule. I'm going to try and do different times, but I hope to just provide this format to really answer questions in depth, help you guys with your gardens, hope to build relationships through the chat so that you guys can, support each other. If you feel like this was helpful, certainly let me know. I appreciate what I see now. When you go over to my YouTube channel, there's going to be membership areas to kind of give feedback. Just keep giving the feedback, because I really am grateful that people are willing to pay, X amount of dollars. I really want to make sure I deliver something that's valuable. And I wanted to start now. So I have September, October, November, December to really build this format out between the two tiers and figure out what's helpful. One of the things that I added, some of you may not have seen it, is that I just added in the tier, is that if you have a question and you put it into the membership tab on my YouTube channel, I will answer those within 48 hours. So that if you're doing something in your garden, I'm not doing a live for another 7 or 10 days. If you got something pressing, you can put it in there and I will answer it within 48 hours. I'm glad you guys liked it. And I like this format. Sometimes if I'm, doing a public live, I have to come up with kind of an outline, and it's not always appropriate. I shouldn't say that. It's appropriate, but sometimes it's limited and it's not what people are looking for. I feel like doing it this way, we can really build an outline within this framework and topics that are really valuable, and really kind of have it flow more organically to different things that are on our minds. And it really becomes, I think, a better conversation. I feel like this flowed better with me being able just to concentrate on the questions, talk about what I know, not having to over rely on an outline that went step by step. And I kind of like the flow. And then finally, I don't have a discount yet, but next time, or maybe in the membership thing chat, I'll be putting in a discount for my seed shop. It should be pretty significant. I'm just trying to figure out what to do. And there was one more thing that I just forgot. That's the beauty of getting old. You forget. As long as you know you're forgetting, you're okay. Let me just look at this real quick. Oh, this is what I wanted to say. So if you did sign up for the second tier, I am doing videos that are unique to the membership. I'm thinking for the Grow as I Grow series, it's going to be a little bit more about kind of grow as we grow. What I'm thinking of doing is, in some cases, maybe people send me, 10 or 20 seconds of their garden, and I will attach it to the end of that video so people can see other people's gardens. You could put out your social media on there if you want to, but really try and build that around something that's a little bit unique with what we're all doing, and kind of build something that's a little bit more interesting. That being said, I don't want to just do a video that's me saying the same stuff I say in a public video. So feel free to leave feedback on what you think would make a cool, exclusive video, is what I'm trying to say. So the second option, there's just tier 1 and tier 2. One's $6.99, the other one is $9.99, and I'm just building onto that, if that's what you meant by second option, Gail. All right, I am good to go. Enjoy your week. The next two Garden Live mentorings are set up for the month of September with the times on there, and I will stay in touch. You guys have a great evening. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.